Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. Things are getting ugly in the state of Minnesota and across the nation where it comes to illegal aliens. I use the term illegal aliens because that's the legal and really better term for who we're talking about. They are breaking the law by cutting the line for immigration. They are not immigrants. Immigrants come in legally. They come here to be Americans. They integrate into our culture and add to our society. The Trump administration has been fulfilling President Trump's promise to deport those that have broken the law. Yes, illegal aliens have broken the law by just simply entering our country uninvited, but they are going after criminals first. And if they find other illegal aliens along the way, well, then they deport them too. But the crazy left has been doing everything they can to protect criminals. And many don't understand why they would do that. Why are these leftists trying to protect criminals? In fact, leftists are using children for their purpose of doing this now. In fact, this comes from the Daily Wire, and it says, as tensions in Minnesota continue to flare up over immigration and customs enforcement, or that's ICE, of course, actions and allegations of rampant fraud, far left actors and activists have decided that it would be expedient to inflame the issues further. So it shouldn't come as a shock that the teachers' unions and their activist allies have chosen to join in and provoke further unrest and strife. In fact, you have Christians praying for peace. You have these crazy leftists and teachers' unions and activists that are trying to stir up strife and unrest. In fact, a recent video posted on X claims to show K-12 students and teachers in St. Paul, Minnesota, walking out of school in protest over ICE. Days later, the St. Paul Federation of Educators, the SPFE, put out a statement calling for its members to engage in a day of action and stating that there would be no work, no school, and no shopping. Unsurprisingly, this comes with a list of demands, such as the removal of ICE from the state and the defunding of the federal agency. The Organization of Educators, and I put that in air quotes, then publicly proclaimed that it was on the side of students while simultaneously shutting down schools in a district where roughly 70% of all elementary students are not proficient in math and reading. However, SPFE and its members are sending a clear message that their top priority is not the education of children and families that, of course, they serve, but far-left social justice activism. Unfortunately, this is a feature, not a bug, of the dominant ideology just permeating the Gopher State's education system writ large. Social justice activism is now the primary ethos of a system corrupted by left-wing political actors who have been turning classrooms into street activist training programs in service to a revolutionary industrial complex. Minnesota is not the only place that this is happening. It's happening all over. But in the College of Education, for instance, teacher candidates are conditioned into far-left political ideas that are often sold to budding educators as best practices. Again, air quotes. Future K-12 instructors are then expected to incorporate these ideas into their own methodologies. For example, Minnesota State University Mankato's College of Education states in its conceptual framework that the teacher training program's vision is to, quote, inspire lifelong learning and professional engagement through racial consciousness, social justice, and inclusion, unquote. The program aims to prepare anti-racist practitioners by using critical race theory, CRT, as a foundational framework focusing on privilege, oppression, systemic racism, and social justice activism. In fact, future elementary school teachers are required to take a course titled Ed 101, Instruction on Critical Race Theory in Education. But it is not just the training of teachers that is problematic. Some university programs are offering free lesson plans and resources to K-12 teachers that promote left-wing biases and agendas. Such is the case with the University of Minnesota Twin Cities Race in indigeneity, I guess is how you pronounce that, disability, gender, and sexuality studies. That's RIDGS, RIDGES program, which has created and made publicly available ethnic study lesson plans for K-12 schools that are riddled with far-left ideologies promoting youth activism and that type of thing. For instance, a sixth grade lesson titled Protest Art and the Movement for Black Life focuses on the Black Lives Matter movement and how to create their own protest art for a cause of their choice. The multi-day plan reads like a revolutionary training program meant to prepare 11-year-olds for some yet to be determined protest. However, if there is any doubt about these ideologies tricking out the universities and trickling out of the universities into the K-12, look no further than St. Paul Public Schools, the SPPS, their Critical Ethics Studies curriculum, a 2023 RIDGS report on the deeply divisive course highlights the 7 principles students are taught throughout the year, including critical consciousness and resistance. According to statements included in the document, students learned about protests and civil disobedience and were inspired by the Third World Liberation Front. Like SPPS, Minnesota's public schools, the MPS, their ethnic studies course also saturated with revolutionary dogma. In one of the classes, students learn to challenge the white savior narrative and that slavery, genocide, and white supremacy all stem from capitalism and the Western culture. Well, naturally, the course is the course in question also includes student activism. Shocker. So it should come as a little surprise that K-12 students from both SPPS and MPS appear to be planning their own mass strike and walkout over ICE. Of course, it is highly probable that they are getting guidance from parents, teachers, and local activists. And while Minnesota's streets heat up during the dead of winter, parents and the public need to be aware that far left actors inside and outside of the educational system have been preparing teachers and students for years to be street activists and protesters. Local and national leaders, first and foremost, need to ensure that the youth and their teachers can peacefully exercise their First Amendment rights safely. But there also needs to be investigations into the revolutionary industrial complex that has taken over Minnesota's entire education system. Families, students, and communities deserve better than their educational system. And I would say that this is, this is reason number 1,862 of why you should be homeschooling children, your children in particular. And the other thing is, we had a lot of high schools here in the state of Washington walk out this last week in protest. These students walked out with their signs that they were given and all that kind of stuff. And in the state of, I just decided to do a little bit of math because I can do that. and of course, in the state of Washington, each student, taxpayers pay $20,000 a year per student per year. They are required to go to class 180 days. And so that, if you do a little bit of math, even if you have to use a calculator, it works out to $111 a day per child that the state of Washington pays to teach kids. So $111 per day to teach a child. And if there was one protest that the paper said that generated about 250 kids. Well, if you again do the math, that's almost $28,000 that the taxpayers were out. Well, I mean, they had to pay it. They weren't out. They had to pay it, and they paid for this protest, $28,000. So the question is, what are they fighting for? What are these crazy lefties fighting for? Who are they desperately trying to protect as they come against ICE and others? Well, again, this article comes from the Daily Wire, and it says, as large-scale protests against federal immigration authorities intensified in Minneapolis, federal agents say they arrested a host of criminal illegal aliens with convictions for child sex crimes, drug possession, and more. The latest detainees bring the Department of Homeland Security's Operation Metro Surge arrest total to 3,500. According to a memo first shared with the Daily Wire, among those nabbed were Q Moa, a criminal illegal alien from Laos, who was convicted of using a computer to facilitate child sex crimes. Also arrested was Bandina Solano, a Guinean national who was convicted of domestic assault, possession of drugs, theft, providing false names and birth date to a peace officer, financial transaction credit card fraud, driving while intoxicated, and possession of shoplifting gear. All of that. He was arrested. He was detained. In total, DHS arrested 5 illegal immigrants convicted of domestic violence, 4 convicted of driving under the influence, and 3 perpetrators of fraud. Most of those arrested had multiple offenses. Their countries of origin included Mexico, Ukraine, Laos, Honduras, Ecuador, Guatemala, Guinea, and Vietnam. Recent arrests included Song Nok Tran, and he was a criminal alien from Vietnam, convicted of criminal sexual conduct, felony burglary, and driving while impaired. Mexican illegal alien Juan Antonio Pena Perez was convicted of engaging in organized criminal activity and possession of a firearm. You go on and on. The Department of Homeland Security also confirmed the arrests of at least 5 violent illegal immigrants around the nation on Monday. Their crimes included murder, child cruelty. And ICE has maintained that 70% of those arrested have been charged or convicted of a crime. 70% of those being arrested and detained. Quote, President Trump and Secretary Noem unleashed ICE to target the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens. And yesterday, ICE arrested murderers, child abusers, and violent assailants. A Department of Homeland Security spokesman went on to say that these are the type of thugs we are getting off the streets and out of the country every single day. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, Monday's arrests include Christian Mayorga Rodriguez, an illegal alien from Mexico, convicted of murder in the Los Angeles County of California. Jose Garcia Mendoza, an illegal immigrant from Mexico convicted of child cruelty in Santa Maria, California. Hector Romero Vengas, a criminal illegal alien from El Salvador convicted of assault in Riverhead, New York. Juan Perez Diaz, a illegal alien from Mexico convicted of battery in Tampa, Florida. Carlos Alonso Koch, a illegal alien from Guatemala, convicted of 5 driving under the influence charges in Nebraska. These nationwide arrests come as the Trump administration, of course, is facing increased scrutiny over its illegal immigration crackdown in Minnesota, and federal immigration authorities in Minnesota have faced growing opposition since an immigration and customs enforcement agent shot and killed Renee Good earlier this month. And protests in the city intensified days ago when, of course, a Customs and Border Protection agent shot and killed Alex Peretti, an incident that has deepened the fissures in the Trump administration over how to handle the deportation effort. Quote, "We are in Minnesota to protect Minnesotans from criminal illegal aliens and get those criminals out of their neighborhoods." This is what the Homeland Security spokesman told the Daily Wire, and said, "Our recent arrests on Friday and over the weekend included sexual predators, domestic abusers, predators of fraud, robbers, and violent assailants." The DHS spokesman acknowledged this opposition, but stressed that protests would not prevent agents from discharging their duties. The Department of Homeland Security reports that ICE agents have a 1,300% increase in assaults against them, a 3,200% increase in vehicle attacks, and an 8,000% increase in death threats against them and their families since the Trump administration's deportation effort began. Now, President Donald Trump announced on Monday that he was dispatching Border Czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis, and that Homan would report directly to him. Shortly after that announcement, Border Patrol Commander at Large Gregory Bovin was relieved of his high-profile duties and returned to his previous post as a California sector chief. Bovin and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem have come under some fire for the response to Peretti's death, and Homan's return to the scene has fueled speculation that the president may soon sideline Noem and her allies in the attempt to kind of relieve tensions around Minneapolis. In fact, they did actually say that she's going to focus more on the actual border now. So all that brings us to this. And I thought this was actually pretty good because I really thought that this was fair. This is an opinion piece that was put out by Ben Shapiro, and he says the Democrats' attempt at chaos in Minneapolis has now bore fruit with the help of legacy media coverage. It's also the result of 2 tragic incidents, and it is indeed the result of mishandling of those tragic incidents by people inside the Trump administration. That combination means that the attempt at chaos by Democrats in Minneapolis has actually worked to some extent. It has now driven the Trump administration into action. The Trump administration yesterday announced that the Gregory Bovin, the Border Patrol chief, has been removed from Minnesota and will apparently return to El Cedro. Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, is also on thin ice, given her mishandling of the 2 tragic cases in which the American citizens were shot by federal agents under disputed circumstances. And the mishandling of those situations by both Gregory Bovin and Kristi Noem has put the administration in a particularly poor position, as he says. But let's not forget that this begins with Democrats attempting to obstruct federal law. Democrats have been obstructing federal law and attempting to dissuade the administration from enforcing the law, while the administration has been forced to actually change its tactics with regard to deportations. The Trump mass deportation policy, which has been part of Trump's stump speech since 2015, has suggested that all illegal immigrants have to go. The reality is that Americans are much more focused when it comes to actual deportation from the United States of America. They may be fine with the idea of mass deportation, but the place they really want to focus, and the politically easy call, is to deport the people who are committing rape and arson and sex and assault and murder and things like that. Early on, the administration did an amazing job of specifically targeting those people. The problem is that blue states have refused to work with ICE and tolerated obstruction of the federal law enforcement. And that has meant that ICE has become more targeted in its pursuit of criminal illegal aliens. If local authorities work with ICE and you pick somebody up for rape or murder or some other crime, you check their immigration status. If they're here illegally, you call up ICE, and that person ends up being deported. But if local authorities don't work with ICE, that person may end up in jail or in a system acquitted or released for lack of evidence and can end up running around the countryside. That's what's been happening in blue states since October. What that means is that ICE, when it goes to actually trying to do deportations, ends up picking up people who may or may not have committed a crime. This is a point that's been made by the White House border czar, Tom Homan, who said if they let ICE in their jail, ICE could arrest the bad guy in the safety and security of the jail. That also means that ICE does pursue a criminal illegal immigrant, and they now have to go and knock down the door. That makes ICE confrontations more likely. It makes protests more plentiful. It means uglier pictures on your television. This is being facilitated and driven by Democrats' sanctuary city policies. But what that also means is that those ugly pictures on your television change how people think of the issue in general. People like it when the law is enforced. They like law and order. They just don't like to see law and order in process. They don't want to see it happen. This is not just true for illegal immigration. This is true for normal police operations. Policing is a very messy and difficult job. This is why you will see many circumstances in which somebody takes a video of police officers having to do his or her job, and the entire online crowd will jump on the police officer for having to do the kinds of things police officers have to do, because pretty much every person who's dealing with a cop is experiencing the worst day of their life. And all day long, the cop has to deal with police on their worst day. Thus, he is likely to encounter people in their most violent state. That means that pictures on the television when this stuff is, getting broadcast are ugly. And just like everything else ugly in life, people don't like to see the ugliness. They just like to see the result. When those ugly pictures involve American citizens being killed under disputed circumstances, that allows legacy media actors to treat all of law enforcement as an exercise in brutal tyranny, and to start going again and protesting against them. Which brings us to Jimmy Kimmel. Believe it or not, here's what Kimmel said just 2 nights ago. He said, "I spent the weekend, like probably a lot of you did, looking at my phone and just feeling shocked and sick about what is happening in Minneapolis. One video after another, screaming people being torn from their families, Americans, people who were born in the United States, being pulled out of their cars for the crime of having an accent or whatever. Children, small children, babies, being tear gassed, taken into custody, separated from their parents, just one atrocity after another being committed by this gang of poorly trained, shamefully led, mask-wearing goons. And that is what they are. They're goons committing vile, heartless, and even criminal acts. And it's sickening to watch, and it's frustrating to watch. It's like we're all being forced to play a game that has no rules. They just make up the rules as they go along. Well, when you hear Kimmel label our law enforcement as jackbooted and masked thugs who are out there pursuing atrocities against Americans, that is the story that the left would like to tell. And they facilitated that story by obstructing federal law enforcement. And this is the game. Kimmel continued by lying about the circumstances under the which Renee Good was shot. Quote, they won't even admit that it was a mistake. They say the Honda SUV Renee Good was driving was weaponized. They say the gun Alex Peretti had a license to carry in open carry state. Many of these same people scream very loudly about when it was Kyle Rittenhouse carrying a gun that Alex Peretti did not even draw, did not touch, a gun that was taken from him by one of the agents before he was shot dead by another one. They fired 10 times on the ICU nurse. They're telling us it was justified. You know, is that the law and order that you voted for? You see, notice what he's doing there. He takes some facts and then he wraps a giant fiction around them. It is true that DHS claimed Renee Good had committed an act of domestic terrorism, and they did the same with Alex Peretti. This is why, he said that failures inside the Trump administration have made Democrats' job easier for them in order to shut down law and order. But notice how Kimmel wraps that into a generalized critique of all law and order in the United States, and then suggests that the only possible solution is to simply allow our immigration law to go unenforced. In fact, Kimmel continues. He says, my wife and I, a family in Minneapolis, are afraid to take their kids to school. They're afraid to go to work. And I can only imagine how people who aren't white feel about this. How does this end? What's the plan here? Is the plan to just keep doing this in every city that didn't vote for Donald Trump? Does anyone on any side believe this is good leadership? What he's doing here is also a lie. This is only happening in blue cities. Blue cities are the places that are not working with ICE. Red cities are working with ICE, so it's not a problem. Blue cities are not working with ICE, so it's a problem. This is all incredibly frustrating to watch if you are attempting to be objective-minded about the very difficult realities of enforcing the law, and you recognize that there has been a mechanism set by the blue states in order to obstruct the enforcement of that federal law, and that the people attempting to enforce that law are then blamed when things go wrong. It's deeply, deeply frustrating. The problem is that the frustration does not change the fact with regard to public opinion. CNN's Harry Enton pointed out that the net approval numbers for ICE have plummeted. This is why the other day the Trump administration attempted to change course by honestly assessing what has been going on, recognizing that people are attempting to obstruct the law, and also attempting to change some of the staffing decisions that have been made. Trump is sending the person who should have been in charge all along, Border Czar Tom Homan, who since the beginning of this has been the law and order, let the full investigations take place, we're enforcing the law kind of guy. Tom Homan has always been the adult in the room on this policy, and the Trump administration is reorienting toward the better parts of the administration in terms of handling this and trying to de-escalate the situation. Whether that de-escalation is possible is going to be, at least in part, up to the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. Democrats are clearly sensing blood in the water here. They're clearly they sense momentum, which is why this entire chaos operation run by the Democrats in a disaster area and is a disaster area, and if they can politically win by obstructing federal law, that is a massive problem. But it's quite possible here that the Democrats win the battle but lose the war, meaning that if they win the battle against ICE, if they get Americans to briefly see ICE as the problem and illegal immigration as secondary and a secondary issue, if they get all of that to happen in the short term, that may not be the result that they want long term. We saw that exact thing happen in 2020 when the police were treated like an invading army by the Democrats. And for a moment, the police were wildly unpopular. And then it turned out that the crime rates radically skyrocketed and people got mad and turned on the Democrats for that, which is why the Democrats have been underwater on the immigration issue and also on policing for years on end. Democrats could win the battle against the Trump administration in Minneapolis for the moment, but ultimately lose the war. And again, I think that was really good, because I think that what you're seeing is the Democrats are playing a game, and what they're doing is they're using these protesters, and it's we've gone over on the podcast. Many of these are paid; they're paid organizers, and they're just stirring the pot. And they're doing it for political reasons, and they're using even kids to do it. And they're doing it for political reasons. And unfortunately, it's getting people killed. It's getting people all stirred up. And what are they actually doing? They're protecting criminals. They're protecting criminals from being arrested and deported. And I don't know. I would love to hear from you on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.